That's pretty full, that's pretty close, and that's out. Will they be asking the third umpire to get involved?
Let's move on to the West Indies now. We spoke about how important it is for the captains to make the teams perform well as a unit.
So one thing that's really interesting is that I want to quickly mention Jason Holder. With Jason Holder, the Barbados Prime Minister actually said that it's very interesting that she criticized that he's in the reserves for the squad. And he's been having a good IPL as well. So, it's a question mark. Like, why is an all-rounder like Jason Holder in the reserves? But coming back to the IPL, Shimron Hetmeyer, he actually has the highest strike rate of the tournament, if I'm not mistaken. And we saw like how dangerous he can be in the PSL as well. So I'm just interested to see what he provides in the World T20, because we know they have a scary batting lineup already.
And you spoke about, the scary batting lineup right now, but also recent form is something I look at as well. Against Australia, especially, they've been playing extremely well of late. So that's one really good sign about how Pollard is managing to gather the troops, right? Yeah. You spoke about Shimron Hetmeyer. I want to also talk about Chris Gayle. Now you have Chris Gayle, Andre Russell, Pollard, Dwayne Bravo, getting all these players, Simmons, Lewis. One thing, we know with West Indies you have big names, but let's focus on the players drop. You spoke about Holder, but also Narayan is a player that has tremendous experience in T20 cricket. Yeah. In fact, at one point, perhaps he was the best spinner around, right? Now he's more of an all-rounder as well, so you can rely on him for that batting capacity, the capacity for batting, right? Also, Sheldon Cottrell.
I think it'll make a difference, but not that much, because I do think they have the right players as replacements. And one thing I want to say about West Indies also is that a lot of the players who are in this squad were in the squad of the 2016 World T20 where they became champions, actually. And that, to me, makes a big difference. Obviously, recent form matters, and that World Cup was quite a while ago, and a lot of the players have aged. Some might not be in form, but just that knowing that these players have won the previous World Cup, and a lot of these players were in the 2012 World T20, which West Indies also won. The only team, by the way, that has won 2 World T20s. No other team has done that. So if they can make it a third, a lot of it, like you said, depends on if they can get together and execute the skills that we know that they have.
Agreed. One player I forgot to mention was Puran as well, who is an explosive hitter, right? West Indies team, it's all about the right combinations. Most recently against Pakistan, one of my favorite players we saw was Roston Chase in the test. I don't know why I'm talking about test, but I really enjoyed watching players like that, have such an important role in batting and bowling as well. So let's do you want to add anything to the West Indies team?
Not really. I think they're just in that group of teams that we know that, the scary teams that on their day can win anything, but they might be a little inconsistent. But in T20 cricket, I think it is their most consistent format. So I think they are being overlooked despite being world champions, and I can see them as a semi-final team. If they make the semi-finals, I won't be surprised at all. Like, if they win the tournament, I won't be surprised at all.
Noted. Let's move on to everyone's favorite team. Let's talk about Team India right now. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Indian team? Just before we address this, what are your thoughts on the selection? Dhawan not being selected, right? You have who else is there? Chahal not being selected based on recent form. Although Dhawan does have good recent form, he had a really good IPL last season and this season as well. What are your thoughts on that?
India is, we all know that they're a terrifying team on paper. They're one of the tournament favorites along with England. For me, they're one of the tournament favorites.
No doubt.
But right before going in the specifics of the player, I just want to mention something about India in the last 10 years in ICC tournaments. After the 2013 Champions Trophy that they've won, this is their record in ICC tournaments, despite being favorites on paper in a lot of them. 2015 World Cup, they lost in the semi-finals. 2016 World T20, they lost in the semi-finals. 2017 Champions Trophy, they lost in the finals. 2019 World Cup, they lost in the semi-finals. And in a few of those games, they were favorites.
Test championship as well.
Yeah, Test championship. 5 tournaments that they haven't won despite being favorites in a lot of them, except for the 2015 World Cup.
Do you attribute this to
probably.
Kohli's captaincy?
That's the whole conversation. That is because 2011 World Cup, 2013 Champions Trophy, Dhoni's captain and they win both of them. As soon as Kohli becomes captain, maybe it's just bad luck. I think Kohli is a really good captain, especially a really good Test captain.
Absolutely. Agreed.
But there's always going to be this question mark of what if Rohit Sharma was the captain of India's limited overs teams, because he is the most successful IPL captain, right? So there's just going to be this ghost is what I'm seeing that's going to be haunting this Indian team, because it's time they're going to say to themselves, it's time that we actually win the World Cup because we are favorites. And that can be an added pressure actually instead of a help, because like they have the biggest fan base in world cricket and their fan base is disappointed in their recent tournament results and they expect them to win. So let's see how they do.
100% agree with you there. Let's focus now on the Indian team, right? You have KL Rahul, who's in impeccable form. Rohit
Top
Sharma,
run scorer.
Ishan Kishan, right?
Yeah.
Amazing batsman. New batsman as well. One thing I like about Team India is that they somehow empower their new batsmen really well. I think that's one role that Kohli plays really well. The fact that he empowers incoming batsmen, he gives them that confidence to go out and enjoy themselves and explore new aspects of their game. That's one thing I really like regarding Team India. Furthermore, you have Rishabh Pant, you have Hardik Pandya. But one player that's my favorite player in Team India is Ashwin. And I think of late his I don't know if resurrection is the right word, but coming back into the Indian team has been, his comeback has been amazing. In each format that he's played, he does add something. He does add that X factor to Team India. What are your thoughts on Ashwin?
Ashwin's a class bowler. Like, he's a very, very clever bowler. He has a lot of variations. But the last World Cup is going to haunt him because it was his no ball in the semi-final against West Indies that allowed, I believe it was Lendl Simmons to get off, and then he scored a match-winning knock. So he's going to want to make up for that. And I also want to quickly talk about Bumrah. Everyone's talking about Bumrah. He's their strike bowler in all formats, but especially in T20 cricket, if not one of, he might be the best death bowler in the entire world. Like, who else can hit Yorkers as consistently as he can, right?
Okay, so for me, the only weakness in Team India is their middle order. There is that uncertainty that, it could be good luck for the top order batsmen, but for me, I just feel that to see the true strength of the middle order, that's really important when assessing title challenges.
Agreed.
So with Pakistan, it's another problem. However, the one team that's not a problem with is England. We spoke about Livingston, Butler. All these players. You have Bairstow as well. Yeah. So Team India does need to focus on that aspect. You don't have Dhoni this time around. Yeah, it's going to be. I gave some win
conditions for some teams in the previous teams we talked about. For me, the win condition for India, if they want to win, if they're going to win this World Cup, if the batsmen, apart from if Kohli and Rohit get out, but their lower order batsmen and like Pandya, like Pant, all those guys, if they fire when Kohli and Rohit don't fire, because there is going to be a crucial game where Kohli and Rohit don't fire. They're the best, but they're also human, right? But if their middle order can pick up the slack, I think they can win this tournament. I think that's what's going to make them win this tournament, because they have all other bases covered. But their middle order is the weak point, like you said.
And
I wouldn't say weak, but I would say unproven.
Agreed. And let's not forget that they've had the perfect practice for this tournament. IPL.
Oh, yeah.
In UAE.
In the UAE.
Right?
Yeah,
most important factor there. They've been there. They don't have to worry about the whole quarantine that many other teams are facing right before the tournament commences, right? So I feel they're just perfectly suited. The tournament is theirs for losing, right? The tournament is theirs. Yeah. We've spoken about India. We've spoken about England. Which team do you feel we should talk about now?
Do you want to just quickly talk about New Zealand?
Of course.
Quick. Yeah.
Let's speak about New Zealand. Ali,
Pakistan fans' favorite team these days, New Zealand. But no, in all seriousness, look, New Zealand are This is the best New Zealand team on paper over the last 2-3 years that they've ever had, right? And like I think they're also one of those teams. Maybe their batting lineup isn't quite as strong as England, but I feel like they're one of those teams that have all bases covered. That's what I think of when I think of New Zealand. Like their fast bowling, their batting. Like you look at like Guptill, Williamson is very crucial in that. In the UAE, like we said, what if the conditions aren't like the roads that we saw in the PSL? What if the conditions do a little for the bowlers? That's when someone like Williamson, who's so technically correct and who can anchor so well, he can come in. And you need people like that in crucial games where hitters may not have, like in a semi-final, your hitters don't have the same confidence. You need an anchor like Williamson. But even their bowling is like, you have people like Ferguson and Bolt, like I think it's just a very good team, like that has all its bases covered.
One of my favorite aspects about the New Zealand team, you spoke about bowling, but I want to speak in more detail about the spinning department. Ish Sodhi, tremendous player, but my favorite, Mitch Santner. We saw how crucial he was to New Zealand in the previous World Cup. We saw his game against Pakistan, right? The impact that player does have is insane. For instance, so Mitch Santner
with the bat as well.
He's a key. He can hit he can hit a long ball, right? Along with that, we're both forgetting Tim Southee. Tim Southee is a veteran of the game. He's experienced, and he's going to be instrumental to New Zealand as well because he has that variation, which is something that you look at bowlers like Bolt and, you spoke about Ferguson not having it to the extent that he does have. He's extremely gifted, and he's one of the few bowlers that can bowl a test match delivery in a T20 game. Mark my words, I saw this against Pakistan, and they were playing a test match attack versus Pakistan. Yeah. With slips, it was as if we were watching Test cricket. So Saudi is one of the few bowlers that possess that skill.
Yeah, I think this is the bowling lineup that New Zealand are gonna go with: Saudi, Bolt, Ferguson, Neesham, Santner, and Sodhi. And that's like literally the definition of all bases covered. 2 very different spinners, an all-rounder fast bowler, and 3 very different fast bowlers. I think they're honestly for me, like definitely a semi-final team. Like they look very strong.
Noted. Really quickly, I want to talk about Kyle Jameson. What do you think about him? He does have pace. He does have that bounce. We saw him perform extremely well against Pakistan. What are your thoughts on him? Right. Does he make it to your starting lineup? I don't think he has that recent form.
Exactly. I think it's between him and Ferguson, because they're that similar sort of hit the deck, like sort of intimidate the batsman, the pace. So it's between him and Ferguson, and a lot will depend on their management, seeing who's in better form in nets or in practice games and stuff like that. I think one of those 2 will play.
Agreed. The most important factor of this New Zealand team, I don't know if you mentioned him, but I haven't mentioned him so far, is Tim Seifert. He's explosive. Yeah. He gives me Kamran Akmal vibes back in the day. When you notice, he's a keeper as well. We've seen in the past, keepers have always been really good batsmen, but Tim Seifert, if he opens the batting, or even if he comes one down, that position, he goes all out, right? I don't know how he's going to play in the UAE. We keep coming back to that. It's the UAE, but had this been in New Zealand, even if it's on road-like pitches, as you've mentioned, I think he's going to go crazy. So that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing in New Zealand. Tim Seifert. What are your thoughts on Tim Seifert, really quickly?
Seifert, he's a very terrifying player, and he has the sort of like Williamson as a sponge. If these guys get out, it's no big deal. Williamson can hold an end, so that empowers these hitters in the team. Like even Guptill, we know, can be explosive. So like I said, like the more that I think about this team, like the stronger they get. Because I wasn't really, before this video, like, I knew they were strong, but I wasn't really thinking that they're, favorites. But now that I think about it, they're just such a complete team.
There's one thing that separates them from favorites, which are England and India, in my eyes, and that's the confidence, as you mentioned. That's one thing, and we're going to talk about South Africa later on. We can talk about them next, but I feel that New Zealand, like similar to South Africa, is not aware of their worth. They're not aware of how dangerous they can be as a team.
Right.
So I think that is something that England have, that's something that India have, and that's something that Pakistan have as well. Which once New Zealand is established within their ranks, I think they could be formidable.
Yeah.
We
Maybe
spoke-
the World Test Championship has changed that. I know it's a different format, but who knows? Maybe that has given them that, right? The tournament winning vibes, so to speak.